keeping you informed.
Demerara and Essequibo 99.1 FM.
Burby's 99.5 FM. Kaieteur Radio.
Good evening and welcome to this evening's newscast right here on Kaieteur Radio. I am Kevin Smith. Before we get to the news in detail, let's get to the front page comment of today's Kaieteur News along with the page 7 blunt comment. A fourth group has returned prime lands in Ogle to Nissil. We commend all four groups and the people behind them for doing the right thing, the honorable thing. We recognize and applaud them for what could be costly but shouldn't be. The other groups that received similar parcels of those Ogle Prime lands should take shame off their faces and return those lands without further delay. President Ali should, through Nissil, welcome the return of those pieces of prime real estate and then do something more. We call upon His Excellency to take those same returned lands and offer them to Guyanese who are interested and have the financial wherewithal to make the best use of those plots for the betterment of their families, fellow citizens, and this nation. We remind President Ali that charity begins at home and that we Guyanese should have first chance to choose these kinds of lands. Give us the opportunity to do right for ourselves by doing right by us, Mr. President. This is why we applaud the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Zulfikar Mustafa, for courteously and skillfully parrying the overture from the Chilean ambassador looking for an outlet here for his country's exports of fruits and other agricultural produce. We heard Minister Mustafa loudly and clearly. Help us with expertise, but allow us to develop our agricultural base and stand on our own feet. This is what we believe this government should be looking to do in every area of our endeavors, so that we can explore and exploit to our satisfaction the many rich gifts that have been given to us. This means our prime lands, it means all our mineral wealth, and most of all it means our oil. Give Guyanese a chance to prove out themselves and prosper in their own space and their own terms. President Ali, are you listening? How do you, sir, plan on responding? Now for the blunt comment, why threaten lawsuits against those who are providing a public service by exposing rotten and secretive oil deals? Why not sue those oil companies which have colluded with our corrupt politicians to rob our people of their birthright? And now for the news in detail. I am Kevin Smith. When the life of an oil project nears its end, the operator engages in a process called decommissioning. This calls for the plugging of wells along with the removal of equipment and other special materials that would have been attached to the seafloor for the extraction of the oil. The cost of this activity can run into billions of dollars for the operator, and in the absence of any proper safety standards to guide the process, the environment could be left with significant damage. To ensure that Guyana is not left in this predicament from a financial and environmental perspective, the PPPC demanded that ExxonMobil adhere to international best practices regarding decommissioning for the Stabroek Block. This was clearly outlined in the provisions of the production license that was approved for ExxonMobil's third offshore project called Payara. The Church of England, one of ExxonMobil's investors, has dumped all its stocks in the company over its poor record on climate change. A spokesperson is quoted as saying the proceeds were moved to an initiative that aligns with the objectives of the Paris Climate Pact. The church manages $3.6 billion in funds. Bloomberg said that the Church of England indicated it frequently reviews the holdings of its multiple investing bodies in line with ethical principles. The urgent need was underscored for Guyana to develop a strong regulatory framework to keep ExxonMobil in check as it operates 3 oil blocks here. Guyana's recent and ongoing issue with ExxonMobil's flaring indicates that the company is willing to let its operations be as lax as the regulator would let it, given that Exxon has opted to exploit a loophole in its permit so it could continue to flare. In other news, Deputy Chief Elections Officer Roxanne Myers was yesterday released on $300,000 bail for 2 charges in relation to her actions during the March 2020 elections. Myers was slapped with 2 counts of misconduct in public office, and she was not required to plead to the indictable charge. State prosecutor Tariq Mohammed made objections to bail being granted to Myers based on the seriousness of the offense and the fact that the police were unable to make contact with the defendant for over a month. Meanwhile, the trial for the matter against Chief Elections Officer Keith Lowenfield is scheduled to commence in November. In other news, GCOM Chair Claudette Singh is being accused by the Guyana Police Force of facilitating the abuse of the rights of GCOM staffers. Leaders of the parliamentary opposition, Joseph Harmon, has said that the arrest and charges that are being laid against several GCOM officials and staffers amount to harassment by the force. The opposition leader also stated that the fact that the GCOM chair is silent on the arrests makes her complicit in the matters. APNU GCOM Commissioner Desmond Trotman said that Singh has given instructions for documents to be handed over to the police without ascertaining the use of the documents. He added that after inquiries were made, she admitted at the level of the commission that she handed over job descriptions to the police. However, the GCOM chair issued a statement in which she refuted Trotman's claims and made it clear that the commissioners were informed during a statutory meeting about the request for the documents that were made by the police. And moving on, in 2012, BBC News revealed by way of a panorama documentary how the Senegalese government signed away 2 offshore gas blocks that cost its people billions of US dollars. The sweetheart deals were struck with a company called Petrotim, which was registered in the Cayman Islands on January 17, 2012. Petrotim, however, was then and still is an industry unknown. So unknown was the company that it did not exist at the time the deal was struck with company owner Frank Timmis. 2 years after creating the first shell company, the Romanian-Australian businessman, who has a well-known history of fraud, corruption, and misleading investors, created another firm which he called Timmis Corp. It was registered in the British Virgin Islands, and Timmis transferred the 90% stake he had in the 2 offshore concessions, St. Louis and Kaieteur, to his new company. Get the full details of this story in tomorrow's Kaieteur News and Kaieteur Radio's Newscast, how Senegal lost billions on gas fields. Expert says government was aware of obvious corruption red flags but chose to ignore them. And moving on, a Lance Corporal of the GDF is now facing multiple charges after he was on Friday evening caught on camera brutally assaulting a police officer. Currently recovering from injuries is Constable 24030 Wilson. The attack on Wilson by the GDF rank took place just around 20 hours at the western end of the Demerara Harbour Bridge. We were told by a Guyana Police Force Commander of Region 3, Errol Watts, these charges include assaulting a peace officer and resisting arrest. Let's tell you now that in keeping with a promise to ensure that residents of Esau and Jacob on the Maikoni River in Region 5 have potable water, Minister within the Ministry of Housing and Water Susan Rodriguez yesterday, that should be today, commissioned the first potable water system in the community. This is the first time that Esau and Jacob district in Maikoni has access to potable water. Let's tell you now that the Ministry of Health has recorded yet another COVID-19 fatality. According to a release from the Health Ministry, the 103rd COVID-19 fatality relates to a 61-year-old female who died at her home in Region 1. The new death is recorded even as the ministry confirmed 47 new COVID-19 cases, bringing the overall total to 3,405. And that brings us to the end of this evening's newscast. I am Kevin Smith. Thank you for listening. Do have a safe weekend.
Want value for your advertising dollar? Then place your ads on Kaieteur Radio's newscasts. Streamed live on 6 different mediums, reaching hundreds of thousands. Advertise